But third, he's 100% innocent of anything that they have accused him of. Nothing they have accused him of is worthy of his death. He has not sinned. He has not gone against the government. So nothing he has done is worthy of his death. And yet all of these things compile on top of each other in order to get him into the place that he's in. Okay, we're back. It is Bible 365. I'm your host, Kathy Carter, and I'm bringing you the Bible in 365 days, which is a year. And I am reading the Bible every single day using a reading plan called the Chronological Bible Reading Plan, which means historical. And it is available online at oneyearbibleonline.com. You would go on to the chronological section because they have a whole bunch of different reading plans and download their free printable reading plan, which you would use along with your own Bible. And their other options are to purchase a Bible directly from them or to hit their link, which will take you to Bible Gateway, which will do the reading for the day. So whatever choice that you want to make is fantastic. I would love you to read first. That's really the big key, is to read and then to come to me and just kind of hear the flow, how things go, maybe some extra thoughts that I'm throwing in there about like how it affects life. So today it is day 308 and it is November 3rd. Our reading is Mark 15, 2 through 20, Matthew 27, 11 through 36, Luke 23, 1 through 25, and John 18, 28 through 19:16. So it is, again, as kind of like I say every day in the Gospels, it's a bigger reading, but it is very repetitive. So most of the Gospels at this point are all pointing to the same thing. So I like to go back to go forward. So if you've never been with me, this is a brief history. If you've been with me a million times, bump forward about 2.5 minutes and meet me when we get started. For those of you who have never been here, it is important to know your history. The only thing that matters being here is if you know where you've come from. I will never discredit the Old Testament. I think it is imperative to understand what the people knew at the time and how they would have gotten there. Why Jesus matters is because Jesus mattered back in the beginning. The plan that God made started on day one. So I don't want you to forget that or think that this is separate and different and unique from Jesus. I'm sorry, from God. So God was the Lord of the heavens and the earth, and he created all things that you can see, all things that you can't see, things that you don't understand, things that we're probably completely unclear of, like what the heck is in the middle of the earth or what's all the way down at the bottom of that Mariana Trench. He knows all of those things, and he created all of those things. He created us, and he created us in his image. He breathed life into us, and when he did that, he created a relationship, like we're in community with him. And then he placed them, the humans, in the land that he created that they did nothing to deserve or to get. He created them in this and put them in this perfect land. And he gave them one rule. Actually, he gave them two rules. He said two rules, I think. He said, I want you to rule over everything in the earth. I do believe he said, I want you to multiply, but I'm not sure if he said that before or after. But nevertheless, he said, I want you to rule over the earth, and I don't want you to eat from the knowledge. The, I don't want you to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I messed that up actually more than I get it right, which is kind of funny. That's always a tongue twister for me. And the problem is something came in, a serpent came in, and he tested us. And the humans at that time, Adam and Eve, both were tempted and tried and lost in that temptation. And they ate from the fruit, and they severed the relationship between the Lord. The Lord sent people all the time. So people that were already born on the earth, he gave them a message to send them to save the people and to draw them back to him, because that is what is good. He is good, and we are good with him. And they fail time and time and time and time and time again. And in order to have the big fulfillment of scripture from the beginning, he needed to send the son that he created, that is him. It needs to be both God and human. So he created him human to be on earth with us for reasons that you're going to find here, because he's tangible. They can see, hear, taste, and touch him. They know exactly what it is. And then the things that he does, he wants us to emulate in him when he is gone. And so he came and healed and did all these wonderful things in the nation of Israel in order to draw Israel back, so then Israel could draw the entire world and point it all back to God. Right now, what is happening is he has been, the Pharisees came and they arrested him. And now he is in the hands, as of yesterday, he was in the hands of Pilate. And we're going to see what happens there. So again, we're November 3rd, and he is with Pilate. Pilate is the governor of like Jerusalem area, right? So he's the governor of that area. He is Roman. He is Gentile. He is not Jewish. And so his best interests are always for Rome. He's looking out for Rome, and he handles the nation of Israel in the best way in which it would deal with Rome. But a lot of Israel, and this is something I've gone over before, a lot of Israel is in some ways a nation unto themselves. They answer to Rome, so any rules that Rome has, they must follow, but Rome leaves them alone as much as they can unless it butts up against the laws of Rome. So they would tax them and the taxes go to Rome. They would try them, and that, if they did anything against Rome or against the Roman government, then they would obviously come under condemnation from Rome. But mostly they are really an entity unto themselves, and like they're governed by their governing body, which is the Pharisees, the teachers, the scribes, not the tax collectors, the teachers, the scribes, the lawyers, and all of that nation. Like the Sanhedrin is more their leaders. All right, so he is with Pilate, and I'm going to read the Luke version because I feel like it's just a little more. The Luke and the John version have some more information in it. So it says, the whole assembly rose and led Jesus off to Pilate. He's bound. He's a criminal at this point. And they began to accuse him, saying, we found this man subverting our nation. So this was the Sanhedrin again. This was the council of elders, scribes, lawyers, Pharisees, right? They all came together as a leadership body, and they went and arrested Jesus. And then they were like, we don't want to get our hands dirty, so we're sending him to Pilate because Pilate is the governor. And so he's in there with Pilate, and it says, we found him guilty of subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar, and he claims to be a Messiah, a king. So they're exaggerating just a little bit in order to get him in more trouble with Pilate. Because the reality is, this is an Israelite issue. This is not a Roman issue. I don't care what he says. I don't care that he's the prophet. That makes no difference to the nation of Rome. So it only matters if he's doing things to harm Rome, which would be not paying his taxes and claiming to be a king, because there's only one king, and that's the king of Rome. So they are exaggerating the truth in order to get him in trouble. And so Pilate says, are you the king of the Jews? And he says, you've said so. And then Pilate says to the chief priests, I can't charge this guy with anything. Like, everything he's saying really has nothing to do with me. He says, but then they insisted. He said, he stirs up the people all over Judea by his teachings. He started in Galilee. And Pilate's like, oh, he started in Galilee? All right, this man has nothing to do with me. Send him up to Herod. So he's sending him up. He's sending him up north because Herod is in charge of what's up north. And he said, so send him to Herod. When Herod saw Jesus, he was actually pretty excited because he wanted Jesus to do signs. Now, Herod, if you recall, was part Jewish. Pilate was not. Herod was. So Herod followed some Jewish laws, probably not everything, but definitely some of like the celebrations and things like that. So Herod wanted to see who this guy was. This guy's doing miracles and stuff all up and down Israel. I want to see what this guy is doing. So he wants him to perform a sign for him. And then he says he plies him with many questions, but Jesus then isn't answering him. The chief priests and the teachers of the law were standing there vehemently accusing him. So they were like, they wanted to get him. Then Herod and his soldiers ridiculed and mocked him. And then that day, Herod and Pilate became friends because he was like, I can't find anything wrong with him. He dresses him in an elegant robe. He mocks him, makes fun of him. But then he's like, I can't find anything wrong with him. So I'm sending him back to Pilate because there's nothing here for me either. Like, he hasn't come against any laws according to Rome. And so there's nothing really they can do about it. So then it says, moving down into John 18, Then they take him from Caiaphas to Herod, and then Herod takes him back to Pilate, right? And then he says, so Pilate comes to them and asks, what charges are you bringing against this guy? So now he's been back and forth. Jewish people were like, we charge you with this. Pilate says no. Herod says no. Pilate's like, you're bringing him back to me. What am I supposed to do with him? And he's like, if he's not a criminal, we wouldn't have handed him over to you. Like, we want you to do something with him. And Pilate says, take him yourselves. Judge him by your own law. And they're like, well, we can't execute him. So we know what they want. They don't want justice. They want him dead and gone and away from them. Like, they need to expunge this whole hot mess that's been happening. It took them 3 years to dig up enough stuff in order to even try to get him arrested, right? Or to find someone who was going to sell him down the river and they were going to be able to arrest him. And they're like, we can't, once we get him, like, we can't do anything about it. That would be, that's unclean for us. We need you to do it. We want you to be the bad guy, sort of. So then Pilate brings him in. It says Pilate went back inside the palace, summons Jesus, and asks him, are you the king of the Jews? And he says, Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is in another place. And he's like, well, then you are a king. Because again, Jesus is speaking much more metaphorically, not really metaphorically, because it's something we don't understand. He's a king of everything, right? And he's the king of this realm and the heavenly realm. He is the king of the Jews, but he's king of all of the world. But that is not something or a concept that any of them understand at this point. So what he's saying, they wouldn't really catch on to. So he's like trying to get, well, you are a king. So are you a king or aren't you a king? And then he says, I'm not a king of this realm, but you are a king. So explain to me what it is, what you mean, how you mean that you're a king. And Jesus answered, you say that I'm a king. In fact, that was why I was born and I came into this world. I testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of the truth listens to me. So if you know the truth and you're listening for the truth, then you're going to listen to me. And then Pilate's like, what is truth? I'm feeling like in some ways he's asking rhetorically, like he's in government and there's a lot of reality to things are shifted and adjusted and exaggerated to fulfill the truth of their making or the truth that they want people to believe. And again, here I keep saying over and over again, it is political season. It is real close to this political situation. And truth has been spun every way, shape, or form. You can't believe what either one says because either like nobody's telling the truth. Like they've all shifted to one side or the other, or they're hiding truth that one would be saying, right? So that they get a leg up on the other. And it really is all to gain power. And so there's a lot of that going on here too. And he's kind of saying the same thing, like, you're here now. Like, what is truth? So after he said, what is truth? He walks out and then it says, now it's the custom of the festival to release a prisoner. So at this festival that they're coming to, the crowd comes to him and he's like, and they say, oh, it's, release a prisoner. And he has these two prisoners that he has with him. One is Jesus and one is Barabbas. Barabbas was like an insurrectionist. This is actually someone that would be crucified because not everybody gets crucified. So this is someone that would be crucified. He's an insurrectionist. He was coming up against the government. And so they would want to make a big stand against him, right? And have his body standing up in this area so other people would know as a warning, like, oh my gosh, if we try and insurrect, if we try and overthrow the government, then we're going to be put up on there. So it's a fear tactic in some way to get like them to not go up against the government. And so it's either Jesus, who Pilate and Herod have found no right to take his life, or it's Barabbas, who should be the one who gets his life taken, which if all things made sense. And they say, no. We want you to release Barabbas and we want you to crucify Jesus. Because he says, what do you want me to do to Jesus? And he says, we want you to crucify him. The crowd is stirred up by the chief priests and the Pharisees. And he's like, What did he do? I feel like in some ways he's incredulous. Like, I've sat with him and he's calmly sitting there with me. We're beating him, we're mocking him, we're spitting on him, and he's showing nothing. Like, what could this guy have possibly done in order for you guys to crucify him? And the reality is that's something that we should understand. That's a reality that we need to discuss. And I remember when I was an atheist, um, I said, probably much like so many other atheists do, because I hadn't ever read the Bible. I had just heard stories. And of course, some of the stories were, well, he was crucified and he was the Son of God and he was crucified. Big deal. So many people were crucified. What made him uniquely different from anybody else? And what makes him uniquely different is, first of all, the fact that he comes to this world and says, I am God, right? That's a big, unique difference. Second of all the miracles and everything he did for the nation of Israel. But third, he's 100% innocent of anything that they have accused him of. Nothing they have accused him of is worthy of his death. He has not sinned. He has not gone against the government. So nothing he has done is worthy of his death. And yet all of these things compile on top of each other in order to get him into the place that he's in. It says, while Pilate's sitting at the judge seat, so this is down in Matthew 27, while Pilate is sitting at the judge's seat, his wife sent him this message. And again, neither one of them are from Israel, right? His wife sends him this message. Don't have anything to do with that innocent man. So she gets a message in her dreams. I've suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him. So she gets a dream about him and runs out and tells her husband, listen, don't do this. This is really bad. I don't want you to do this. I've suffered a lot in my dreams because I've been dreaming about this. And unfortunately, he's like, I don't want to crucify this guy. And they all say, crucify him. And so it says he takes water and washes his hands in front of the crowd. And he said, I'm innocent of this man's blood, which, by the way, he isn't. So he did not release him, and he's not innocent because it says for fear of the people is why he kept him and he released Barabbas. So he did have the power to release him, although something bad may have happened to him. But nevertheless, he said, I'm innocent, and he's not. And then the people respond, his blood is on us and our children. So they take full blame, and they even put the blame on the generations to come. So they don't just take it on themselves, but they essentially say that everyone who comes after us also takes the blame for the death of Jesus, who was innocent and who was the Son of God. So Pilate takes Jesus, has him flogged. The soldiers put together a crown of thorns for him and stick it on his head. So like quite literally like a vine with all of these thorns on it, and jam it on his head, which obviously would be awful and painful. They flog him, which for those of you who have never, aren't really familiar with flogging, which I feel like most of us are, TV shows we watch and whatnot. They whip him with a cord, and a lot of times it's 40 lashes. So he's whipped 40 times because 41 usually makes the person die. So they flog him 40 times. That tears up your back. A lot of times it's all the way down to the bone. So this is torture. They mocked him, so they humiliated him on top of it. Put him in a purple robe, which would have been like a rich king's robe because they're mocking him as being the king. This crown of thorns on his head. So he has been beaten. He's been spit on. He has been humiliated. He's been mocked. Anything, any way of torture possible, he has been put through by everyone that has been in charge of him. It says they call him the King of Jews. They smack him in the face. And then once more, Pilate comes out and he says, look, I'm bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him. And then the chief priests and everyone keeps saying, crucify, crucify, crucify. And the Jewish leaders insist we have a law, and according to that law, he has to die because he claims he's the Son of God. So when Pilate hears this, he goes up to him and he was like, where do you come from? Why aren't you talking to me? Why aren't you sharing any with me? Don't you realize that I have the power to free you? And Jesus answers, you would have no power over me if it were not given to you. The one who gives the power is the one who gave it to you. He says, therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of the greater sin. So he's saying that God has given you this power. You wouldn't even be able to do this to me except for God, right? He has power over everything. the ones who actually gave you to me. Now, he doesn't say they're the only ones that sin, but he said they have the greater sin. So Pilate does have sin in this circumstance, but he said they have the greater sin. So the Israelite people have the greater sin for turning him over to him. He said, from then on, Pilate tried to get Jesus free. And it says, if you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar, is what the chief priests say to him. So they keep using these little things against him. And then he brought him out and he said, here is your king. And they said, take him away. And he said, should I crucify your king? And they said, we have no king but Caesar. And then Pilate handed them over to be crucified. So the note here is that Caesar they said, we have no king but Caesar, but God was always supposed to be their king first. From, again, back at day one, if you guys were here, like right in the time of Samuel, 1st and 2nd Samuel, they begged for a king, a human king, because they didn't have one. And God was like, I am your king. You do not want a king. Having a king is not going to go well for you. A king is going to use you, abuse you. You take your children, take everyone as servants. A king is not good for you. I am your king. So for them to say, we have no king but this Roman king, is once again, like, talk about blaspheming God. Once again, they're saying anything and everything against God, and they are not dealing with the truth as God has given them. Then it finishes up with, finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. And that's where we're ending for today. If this has been a blessing to you, I want you to like, share, and subscribe. And keep reading. See you guys tomorrow.